Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis, and I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you Christian married man or woman navigate conflict and build connections so you can have a thriving marriage. Today, our topic is what to say when boundaries become punitive. All right, so the whole world seems to be talking about boundaries and how to do them, when we should do them, what they should look like. We hear things like know your worth, self-love, teach people how to treat you. I think I've lost count with how many memes I've seen on social media about this stuff. But I think that the reality is that we really aren't that great at implementing boundaries the right way. There's a way to do this where it actually increases the health of the relationship. And oftentimes, when it's not done well, it feels more like punishment, more like the rod of correction. I should say, not connection, correction. So I want to talk about that today and, maybe the what to say when something like this, just when boundaries go bad. What are your thoughts, Nina, around when boundaries become punitive?
I think it's an interesting topic because we don't really even acknowledge that that's a thing. We just say up front, hey, don't do that. But we don't really talk about, well, what does that even mean? And essentially, when we're talking about how does this occur, it's we're putting a boundary up to punish another person. That's the driving force behind it. And the boundary itself isn't there to protect love, to create space for healing. It's kind of like, you can't talk to me like that. So I'm implementing a boundary and I'm not going to speak to you for 3 days. It's like, really? No, we insert breaks in conversation. So a boundary would be, we don't have communication when we're emotional. That's a boundary for ourselves. So punitive things are things often we do to somebody else to punish and hurt them. Right. So that has absolutely no place in boundaries. Well, and oh gosh, and having said that, we have to also acknowledge that, yeah, sometimes our boundaries are hurtful to other people, even if they're healthy ones. And so just because somebody says, well, your boundary hurts me. I mean, I've had spouses say, well, you can't tell me that her boundary is a good one because it hurts me for her to not finish a conversation. And okay, fair enough. Yeah, it does. It also will hurt you more if she hangs out for that without any kind of emotional control. She's going to damage this further.
Right.
So you have to look at the motive behind it and then the actual execution of it. What is the purpose of it? It's not ever supposed to be punishment. It's protective to create opportunity and health. That's the purpose, to protect. So
I love that. You really summarized that very well. It's about motive and execution and protection. And I think if we keep those three things in mind, it would help alleviate a lot of damage that happens when this goes wrong. Now, I think, and we'll get into this a little later in the conversation, but I think a lot of times we think we know the heart and the mind of a person, because you did mention motive, and the truth is we don't. We really don't know what's happening, but we can observe the execution and the way that it's done, and sometimes that needs to be pointed out. So I want to get into that today and remind our listeners that if they don't do this well, they can actually increase the space that's already there and decrease the chances of being heard or connecting with this difficult person. Okay. So I have a friend who was telling me about a difficult family member that she has just had a hard time with over the years. Um, they've had some violations of trust, they've had some breaches happen, but this is a very close member of her family, and they do vacations, they do holidays, and so it's kind of hard to avoid this person. And she was telling me that she's gotten to the point where she is ready to detach completely from her. And she said that she has the ability to do that with anyone. Like she said, she knows herself so well that when she gets to a certain point, she can act as if you're dead, that like you don't exist.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? Like you're a
Yeah.
complete stranger. And so my question to her was, how do you do that? How do you go from like being so intimate and involved and engaged with the person and just, spending so much time with them to just acting as if they don't exist? But I think what's happened is it's become her coping
Mm,
mechanism. Um, and so, we hear about cancel culture, we hear about narcissism and how they discard of people and dispose of people.
mhm.
And these are just, it sounds like boundaries gone bad, where there was really a need to start smaller
Mhm,
earlier.
mhm.
Is that right? Because
Yeah.
I cannot imagine going from just being completely involved with someone to not ever speaking to them.
Yeah. That's a thing. Like there's a lot of people that just get fed up and end it
Mhm.
and haven't done any of the things that we suggest or any other healthy, communication coach would suggest to try to reach connection, to build a bridge, to work out win-win, those kinds of things. A
Mhm.
lot of times people that can't handle being around somebody that they're so different of opinion with or such a big difference with is because they won't speak up. And then they get to this place of, I'm just done with you. You're dead to me. That is a thing. And it's really sad because we're not supposed to do that. But if we can't handle things in the smalls, she's not wrong. She can't handle the big. And so, when we work on conflict resolution training with people, one of the first things I tell them is, go ask for your fries. When you go through the drive through and you don't get your fries, yes, it's a hassle, but go in the store and say, hey, I didn't get my fries. And people are like, oh, but it's not that big. It's like, well, you wanted it, right? You got to start somewhere. And people are uncomfortable with it. And our cultures become even more uncomfortable because of the siloing that the search engines do.
Yeah.
So we're just going to be exposed to more people that think the same way that we do. And the downside of that is that when we are around someone that thinks differently than we do about anything, we don't know what to do with it. We don't have the practice. We don't have the resilience or the tenacity of being exposed to that on a regular basis to be able to handle it. And it's really sad, but it is a sign of the times that we're in and the internet and the access to information and all of that. We used to not be this way. But handling things in the small, creating, like nobody likes to go create conflict. Well, you have to do that in
Right.
not over everything. Don't be the nagging wife on the roof that nobody wants to be around, or however that verse goes, where you're on the roof, to get away from her. That's how it was.
Yeah.
But we have to go start conflict, because otherwise we end up in these situations, and we don't want that.
Right. Right. And the truth of the matter is, if it's your family, it's kind of hard to really completely detach anyway. So it's not even realistic to think about, completely removing them from your life,
Right.
because, you only get sometimes one mom, one dad,
Mhm.
or if they came from your loins, then, they're going to
Yeah,
be.
you gave birth to that.
Yeah, right. Kind of hard to get rid of them once they come out, can't go back in.
Yeah, there's that. And it's interesting. One of the things that people that get divorced don't realize, and there's this horrible, shocking awareness after the grueling, emotionally traumatizing events of the trial, if it goes that far, in the divorce process itself, is just a gut-wrenching, horrible experience for most people.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of that, oh, we're still interacting because we have children together.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no. So people don't even think, they just want to escape pain. Well, you can't. Life is hard. Can't escape the pain. You're not going to do any better with the next person you marry. You'll get 2 good years out of that. And then you'll do the same stupid thing you're doing now that's making this a mess now. Right. And, oh, but it's my spouse's fault. Well, that's, if you really believe that, then you got more problems than you know, because it always takes 2 people. Patterns exist in relationships because 2 people are behaving the same stupid ways that don't work. So somebody needs to change the pattern. And if the pattern keeps trying to reinsert itself, somebody needs to stop that. There's tons of ways to navigate, to direct things a different direction than to abandon the ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that people can do and they just don't know about them. But the punitive boundaries, I would rather have somebody do boundaries badly than bail on the relationship. I would rather, this is going to sound terrible, but when we teach boundaries to people initially, and okay, I'll admit I've been guilty of this, but just being honest, the whole, I can't talk to you, you can't talk to me, we're done here, this emotional thing that's like, you're ugly as all get out. And you end the conversation in the most hideous of ways. I can't talk to you. You say mean things and then you end it. Okay, well, if you'd been a person that was sitting there and thinking you were long suffering, letting your spouse spew stuff all over you and then saying something else to egg them on, and then they say something back and then you're arguing with them more, and you've got this stupid cycle of argument going on, and you end a conversation, like, good job. Let's just say you did something different. Good job. Okay. And maybe your delivery stunk. Maybe it was like the worst. Maybe you were like mean as Satan himself when you did it. Okay, fine. That's terrible. You can work on that. But the point is you didn't get stuck in the rut. You pulled yourself out of that, and you didn't do the thing you always do that always goes the way that it always does, that then facilitates the environment where your spouse does the thing that they always do, that makes, so you've stopped the cycle. And even if you were hideous and badly behaved, okay, fine. Well, what do you do with that? Well, go apologize. And if you can't do that, we'll work on being humble. Like, go figure out how to be afraid of God. That will help you be humble. Like, yeah, go study that. Do a study on the fear of the Lord. And that'll help you be a little more humble. And then do it again. But this time, maybe use the what to say of, hey, I love you, and I'm feeling kind of emotional. I want to take a break, and we'll come back here and try again. And you turn and you leave the room. You don't say stay for the negotiation. You don't whatever. But the boundary is first self-protective, because you realize, and this means you have to be self-aware. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you realize, I'm going to protect myself. And the cool thing is you're protecting the relationship. Now, if your spouse is the one that loses their ever-loving mind, saying, hey, I love you, time out, let's take a break and come back to this when we can both be calm. And you're not saying you're upset, and maybe you do the first time, but you take a break. And maybe they chase you around the house, and maybe you have to get in your car and drive away. And maybe you got to ignore your phone for 2 hours because they keep blowing it up with text messages and calling you and demanding that you speak to them. Like, but you did something different. So start there. and then grow up,
Yeah.
because adults have boundaries, and they're not punitive. They're ones that are designed to protect. Children are victims. Children are manipulative and punitive and revengeful, terrible little creatures. Let's grow up.
Yeah.
Now, I think I'm preaching myself as much as anybody on this one sometimes. I mean, I'm much better at this than I used to be, but boy, when I first started ending conversations, like nobody would ever want to repeat what I did. And yet everybody does that. We do it badly until we can do it well.
Yeah. Ooh, say that 3 times. Yeah. That's great advice.
Are you a Christian man or woman who's done everything you know to do, and yet you're still stuck? Maybe you've lost hope. You feel alone. You're discouraged. Like, I get that. I know. And yet you don't want to rip your family to shreds by divorcing. But you can't just keep dealing with the conflict. It's so bad. Did you know that couples who only learn to do conflict better are still not happy? We'll teach you how to turn conflict into connection, but we'll also show you the other research, the must-haves for your relationship to bring joy and connection to your marriage. Like if you don't get that piece, the positive inputs, and they're real specific, it won't matter that you can do conflict. Go to greaterimpact.org and sign up for 2.0 Your Marriage today. Stop the pain. Create the relationship you want today.
What I'm wondering is if you think that we're just really bad at boundaries because we're bad at knowing ourselves, and we just really let things go on for longer than they really should, which is kind of like being passive aggressive and, not really drawing a line when we really should be. You think that contributes to this problem?
Yeah.
I thought so. I just
Yeah.
wanted to point that out. I mean, because we've had this conversation, and I remember specifically an example you used that shows this really clearly when the wife is being like irresponsible with the budget, and she's just going over her credit card limit over and over and over again. And then finally the husband says, enough, I'm taking all of your credit cards, I'm cutting you off completely. And now she can't even go buy groceries.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like an extreme, example of how he should have probably said something sooner.
Yeah. Hello.
For whatever reason, he didn't. And now it's like, extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, and that's human nature, right? Because he probably might have tried once. Hey, honey, I know you're I got the credit card bill, and from whatever department store or whatever it is, and she probably behaved badly, like got defensive and acted ugly, and he probably didn't enjoy that at all, and then took it personally, and maybe they had a big colossal fight. And so the next credit card bill that comes in, he looks at that, and what he sees is the last fight that they had.
oh yeah.
And he's like, yeah, not today. And who can blame him? Because she's so fun to deal with on that one, right? And so then it goes, right? Because once you do that, the next time's easier.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Once you let somebody get away with something, the next time it's easier to let them get away with it. And you're betraying yourself, and you're betraying the marriage, and you don't even know that. And you're betraying her in this situation. You're betraying her too.
Mhm.
Yeah, but he can't see that, and it's not his fault. Like our culture is all foo-foo. Everybody should get along, and Christianity is like everybody has a nice day. Like, no, they don't. Like, how many wars were there in the Old Testament? A lot. How many arguments did people have in the New Testament? A lot. Paul was like, yeah, man, I can't work with you, and left. I think it was Mark or Barnabas, one of the two of them. He's like, yeah, no, I'm not, you can't come with me. And so this is normal Christian living, to have challenging relationships. And so what do? Well, you ride the horse you have. And if you use all the tools in the what to say department. It's, hey, you and I need to have a hard conversation about money. When's a good time to do that? And you jump off that cliff, and they won't like it. Like, don't expect it to go well. Don't expect them to be, oh, thank you so much for pointing out my overspending. Yeah, I'm not. But, how do you go about that? You can be critical. You're overspending again. Or you can ask a question. Hey, so you and I had this conversation, and we were unified. We were aligned on what we were going to spend each month. And this is what came through. Can you help me understand what happened? And you think the best of the person. And that gives them the opportunity to go, you know what? I was so ticked at you that I went out and I bought 4 new dresses. And I actually honestly regret buying 3 of them. And I think I should probably take them back. Okay, fair enough. And then that fixes that problem for the month, right? But we can't even get to that conversation because we jump in with, well, I'm just going to tell the truth. Here's the facts, like, no. And if you haven't had a budget conversation, you're like, I'm making an assumption that people talk about money. Well, a lot of them don't. And so where does that go? Hey, so do you mind, could we like sit down and maybe talk about the goals that we have for our family, and what some of the financial things might be with that? And you have this really beautiful, fun thing you start to create versus just focusing on the problem, right? I know that's why you want to have the conversations, because you're overdrawn every month, right? But that's a symptom of something else that's not there, which is commitment to the dreams, or the communication of the dreams, or even awareness of the dreams. Like, if people don't know why they're there, then they're just going to start cutting up credit cards. So, yeah.
So what do you do when they do that? Like, when they can't have the conversation in a healthy manner, and it's, I'm cutting up your credit cards, and you're like 5 years old all over again. And it's like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
Or in, in the husband's case, if the wife decides she doesn't want to be intimate, because he's been mean, and she's going, I don't know, a long time. And how does he respond to that? I mean, how do you point out, the question is, how do you point out and what to say when it is like extreme, and for good reason? Because there are the dreams, there are the goals for the family unit. But man, oh man, that is just a harsh startup.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And so you got to be above it, which means if you get triggered by it, the very best you could do in that moment is don't say anything. Keep your mouth shut. Go work that with God. Figure out, why am I so upset? Yes, he cut up all of my credit cards. Well, why'd he do that? Well, he thinks I'm spending too much money. Is that true? Well, I don't know, because we don't have any rules around the money. He just decided this. Maybe that's the thing, right? Or maybe it's, oh, well, we did have an agreement and I didn't keep it. Okay, so what do we do here? All right, well, I'm going to play the hand I've been dealt. I'm going to ride the horse that I'm on. I'm going to deal with that. So if it's the situation of we have no budget and he just had enough and there's no limits, and he just decided it was too much, then I'm going to go to him and say, okay, so credit cards are all gone. Got it. How do you want to go about deciding how we spend money? Can we have that conversation? And so you lead, you facilitate. And I know there's some people that will be like, oh, you're suggesting women lead. I'm suggesting anybody that's mature in the moment can lead. Yes. Lead means serve. Okay. Let's just have a Bible translation there. Biggest servant in the room, that's the person who's leading. They're taking initiative to be humble first and saying, hey, how can we work on this? That's what leader means. What can we do here? And if she's overspent, and gender's irrelevant here, by the way, because there's plenty of households that the women do the math So, but if she's the one that's done it and he cut them all up, then own your stuff, like act like an adult and say, hey, you know what? I don't blame you for being mad. You've brought this up like 4 times and I just keep ignoring you. And I don't know what that is in me, but it's wrong. And I'm sorry. And I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I can't buy groceries or put gas in the car to get the kids to school. So how do we handle this immediate now? And then what's necessary here for me to earn trust again so I can be in a space where we can both have access to the money and whatever. And while his behavior is pretty harsh, it's a demonstration of the lack of trust that exists in that situation, right? So we need to earn trust. Trust is something that's earned repeatedly through consistent, reliable behavior. As far as the intimacy thing goes, honey, what's going on? There's something in between you and I where we're not where we used to be. What's happening? How can I help?
Yeah.
She might be like really angry about something that happened 8 months ago, something you said to her mother and she couldn't get you to apologize properly. And so she's like, well, like, all right, well, let's have a different conversation. Cause usually all of these things are symptoms of something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the extreme case. What about the other end of it where there are no lines, but there's just like, I mean, because this is a bad way of doing things as well. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term quiet quitting that's recently come up in the
No, tell me more about this. This is
year.
vaguely familiar. Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, so like since COVID's happened and people are like leaving jobs, there's been this form of quiet quitting, which basically means you do your job poorly, you neglect the heavy, stuff so that you don't get tasked with more stuff or you eventually get pushed out. And it's because some of it is because there's burnout, but some of it is because people are just afraid, right? Of, whatever. And so they do it this way so that they don't have to quit or they don't have to take on more work. And so I've seen that term. I've also seen this happen in relationships where it's like, if you're doing the dishes every night and you're doing a poor job, if eventually somebody's going to say, you don't get to do the dishes anymore because you're not doing a great job. Let me do it. I don't know what to call that, but it's basically the same concept. And it's just a poor way of, establishing a boundary and kind of lets you off the hook from being the bad guy.
Oh man. Yeah. Sorry, no. Like
there you go. Just
Yeah.
saying no probably is what we need to do in those
Well,
situations.
I remember raising teenagers and when they're at my house, like I only have this problem with one of my kids who comes, he's an adult, they're adults now. Then they come to my house and they're all pretty doggone tidy. Like they respect my space, they put things away. I have one that doesn't do a very good job of this. And so I'll ask the question, do you mind putting your stuff away? Well, I'll get to it. Yeah, you said that yesterday and I haven't seen that happen yet. Can you do it today? Like before, like 20 minutes from now. And half the time it doesn't happen. And so then the next thing is, I noticed you didn't put that away. I just want you to know the kitchen is off limits for you until you clean up after yourself. What are you talking about? Yeah, I know. I've asked you multiple times and you're not respecting my stuff. And so when you respect my stuff, you can use it. If you're not going to respect it, then you know what? You're more than welcome to go, out to eat. You're more than welcome to, bring food in here from outdoors, but the kitchen's closed. unless you're going to be respectful of the space. So yeah, I'm that person. I'm also the person that will ask someone to clean up something. And when they do a lousy job, I'll say, hey, are you going to clean up the the kitchen counter, let's say? Well, I did that. I'm not sure you're finished. Can you go double check it, please? And so I'm that person that asks for a good job, you know? And when they were really little, they did the best they could do. And it was good enough. And I didn't redo their stuff in front of them. But over time would help them level up. Right. And I'd teach them and I would add, but people are going to live up or down to your expectations. And if you're going to do a poor job, if I'm a good manager, I'm going to notice that. So if I have a spouse that's not pulling their weight with the with the folding of the clothes, or if I cared about that, which I don't, but if it was something I cared about, like maybe you have a spouse who they're supposed to mow the yard and they do a terrible job. And you wonder, are they trying to get out of this? Right. You have those thoughts about it. So, that's a good thing to talk to the Lord about. Am I judging? Am I, and then you ask a question. So I noticed the yard is looking, I don't know, like there's still some opportunity here. Do you hate mowing? Is that a chore you don't enjoy doing? Maybe we could switch. Is there something, you have a conversation about why. And if they think they're doing a great job, that's one thing, right? If they're like, well, yeah, I don't care very much. Well, sweetheart, I need you to care because the HOA is going to send us a thing. And well, I don't want to do any better than I'm doing now. Okay, well, I guess we can take, $35 out of the budget every week to pay somebody to come mow it because this doesn't work. We're going to get fined. So, but you have conversation, you ask questions, what's going on with this? And with my one kid, that it's dishes, right? They'd stack up in their room. And I would just suddenly notice, that I was out of cups or whatever, and go in there and there's a cup collection. And so I would ask, what's going on that this is challenging? Because it impacts everybody you live with. And I want you to be a good roommate. That's how we do things here. So what's going on that, is in the way of you being a good roommate here? And I'll get some story about some, friend or blah, 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 it's not even related. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, okay, cool. So can we take care of this today?
That is hilarious.
I think quiet quitting was invented by teenagers.
That does sound kind of like a Gen Z thing. So I agree with you. So, okay. And then one last question before we wrap up. If you're the person that is needing to implement a boundary, but you might be the one that's being a little too punitive, how do we check ourselves to make sure our motive is pure and that it's for the health of the relationship and not to get revenge, basically, and take out our frustration on this person we say we love?
Yeah. Well, I think you answered the question with
In
the
the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because if you've got frustration, if I have frustration and I'm thinking of putting a boundary in place, I'm going to check that with somebody else. I'm going to go, okay, I have some emotion around this. I've worked the steps. I can't get rid of the emotion. I'm still, and yet I think something needs to happen. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. And then half the time I'll hear myself saying it aloud and I'll be like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Or it comes out and I don't get one of those pauses, and I'll get reinforcement, and then I'll get questions. But doing life in community, so you don't do this stuff by yourself. You never lead yourself by yourself, right? So you need to have people that if you're in a hard relationship, that you're checking things with, versus just, well, I'm gonna kick them out because they found pornography on their computer. Okay, so you've hired a locksmith, they're coming today, and you've got all their clothes out on the front lawn because you found 2 naked pictures. Okay. That's the first time okay, wait a minute. You know, let's reel in this thing here and have some conversation around this. Like, what's going on? That's your response. Like, that's pretty over the top, right? And maybe they're dealing with somebody that doesn't hear anything, but the extreme response, because those people exist.
Right.
So, but you don't know, right? But yeah, so talk it with somebody. That's it.
Okay. Cool. All right. So, quick summary. If you encounter boundaries that are punitive, seem like they're a little too harsh, or if you're in the position of implementing a boundary and you want to check yourself, some tips here. Start small. You're probably going to mess up and do it bad the first few times, but it's better to do it bad than to completely end the relationship. Make sure you have self-awareness. Before you have that hard conversation, check your heart. If it's too emotional and you think you're going to get triggered, just don't say anything at all. If you need to own up, take responsibility and ask questions. Ask how you can handle things differently. How can you build trust back again? And if you're hurt, ask the person what's really happening, and see if that's helpful. And if you need to say no, say no. If the other person needs to say no, give them the opportunity to say so, but also give them the benefit of the doubt, because they may really be trying their very best. And when in doubt, do this in community. Don't lead yourself by yourself. Get someone that you trust to check to see if this is a good approach. So what will you do with the information you have today? We invite you to check out our website, greaterimpact.org. We have a free PDF called 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells for you to download. We also have an e-course called Strength and Dignity for Women, where you can sign up and learn more about how to show up in conflict. And if you want more information, we have more episodes on this channel where we have more fun topics like this to discuss. We invite you to like and subscribe, and you'll be the first to hear when our next episode airs. Thanks for joining.